Respect her, or you lose me. Right now. Everyone turned. Brian didn't flinch. Say that again, he said, stepping forward, his voice calm but dangerous. Nina rolled her eyes, brushing invisible dust off her dress. I said she shouldn't be here. This isn't her kind of place. A sharp silence cut through the room. Brian's mother stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes lowered. Not from shame, but from years of learning how to survive moments like this. Brian took another step. Apologize. Nina laughed, louder this time. Brian, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. I said, apologize. Or what? She shot back, crossing her arms. Brian didn't hesitate. Or you walk out of my life. Right now. A few people gasped. Someone whispered, he's serious. Nina's smile faded. You're choosing her over me? Brian's eyes didn't leave hers. I'm choosing respect. If you can't give that to my mother, you don't deserve a place beside me. You're unbelievable, she snapped. After everything I've done for you? Brian let out a short, bitter breath. Everything? Like what? Teaching me to be ashamed of where I come from. That's not what You just told my mother she doesn't belong. He cut in. So say it clearly. Say you were wrong. Nina's pride rose like a wall. I won't. Brian nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer all along. Then we're done. The words landed heavy. Brian, don't be stupid, she said quickly, her voice shifting. You're overreacting. No, he replied quietly. I'm finally reacting. He turned away from her, walked straight to his mother, and gently picked up her handbag from the table. Let's go, Mama. She hesitated. Brian, people are watching. Let them watch, he said softly. Behind him, Nina's voice cracked slightly. If you walk out, don't come back. Brian paused for a second, then kept walking. I wasn't planning to. The door closed behind them, and just like that, everything changed. If you're already feeling this moment, go ahead and hit that like button, because the story only gets deeper. Years earlier, before the confidence, before the confrontation, Brian was just a boy trying to keep his head above water. Eat first, his mother said, placing a small plate in front of him. What about you? Brian asked. I already ate, she replied quickly. He looked at her. You're lying, she smiled. And you're too smart for your own good. Brian pushed the plate toward her. We share. No, you need it more. I said we share, he insisted, his voice firmer now. She sighed, knowing she wouldn't win this one, and broke the food in half. That was their life. Splitting everything, including struggles. At school, it wasn't much easier. Hey, Brian, a boy called out one day, laughing. Did your shoes come from the trash or the museum? The class erupted in laughter. Brian looked down at his worn-out sneakers, then back up. At least I have shoes. The laughter faded. The boy scoffed. Whatever, man. Brian turned back to his book. He didn't fight with fists. He fought with focus. Every insult, every look, every whisper. It all became fuel. And at home, his mother noticed. You study too much, she said one evening. I have to. You also have to rest. Brian shook his head. I'll rest when you don't have to work anymore. She looked at him, her eyes soft but worried. That's a heavy promise. I'm strong, he said. She smiled gently. Even strong people need help. I have you, he replied, and that was enough. Years passed, and Brian's hard work opened doors people said would always stay closed. University, a new environment, a new world, and that's where Nina walked in. You're Brian, right? She asked, sitting beside him without waiting for permission. He looked up. Yes. I've heard about you, she said, smiling. Top of the class. Quiet. Mysterious. He raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. Yeah, she teased. You don't talk much. Maybe I just don't have much to say. She leaned closer. Or maybe no one's asked the right questions. Brian couldn't help but smile slightly. That's how it started. Simple conversations turned into daily routines. You're different, Nina told him one evening. How? You don't try to impress anyone. Brian shrugged. I'm too busy trying to improve myself. She nodded slowly. I like that. And for a while, things felt right. When she first met his mother, she was polite. Nice to meet you, Nina said, her smile perfect. You too, my dear, his mother replied warmly. Afterward, Nina said, she's kind. Brian smiled. She's everything. Nina nodded, but something in her expression shifted, just slightly. First, Brian ignored it, but small things started adding up. Do you always have to go home so early? Nina asked one day. My mother is alone, he replied. She's always been alone, Nina said casually. She'll be fine for a few hours. Brian looked at her. That doesn't mean I leave her alone. The tension grew slowly, like a crack spreading through glass. You need to think about your future, Nina said one evening. I am. No, I mean really think, she pressed. The people you keep around you, they matter. Brian's eyes narrowed slightly. What are you trying to say? I'm saying you can't carry everyone with you. My mother isn't everyone, he said sharply. Nina raised her hands. Okay, relax. I'm just being realistic. Brian leaned back, studying her. Realistic or disrespectful? She rolled her eyes. You always take things too personally. Because they are personal, he replied. Still, he stayed. Because he loved her. Or at least he thought he did. Until the night everything collapsed. The gathering was supposed to be simple. Just a few friends, Nina said. Nothing serious. Brian hesitated. I'll bring my mother. Nina paused. Are you sure? Yes. Okay, she said slowly. First, everything seemed fine. Nice to meet you, people said. Welcome, others added. Brian watched his mother smile, trying her best to fit in. Then came the comments. Oh, that's an interesting outfit, Nina said, her tone light but sharp. Thank you, his mother replied politely. Later, you don't drink, Nina asked. No, my dear. Nina laughed softly. You should try. It helps in social settings. Brian noticed. She said no. I'm just suggesting, Nina replied. Then the final blow. Some people really don't understand how to behave in certain environments, Nina said, glancing directly at his mother. That was it. And now, we're back to where it all exploded. Brian stood there, heart pounding, but his voice steady. Respect her, or you lose me. And he meant every word. If you think Brian made the right choice, don't forget to comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. Brian didn't look back. The night air hit his face as he stepped outside, but it did nothing to cool the fire burning in his chest. His mother walked beside him quietly, her steps slower, careful. Brian, she said softly. He stopped. Yes, Mama? You didn't have to end things like that. He shook his head. I did. She's young. People say things they don't mean. Brian looked at her, his eyes firm. No. People say exactly what they mean when they think there are no consequences. She sighed, placing a gentle hand on his arm. I don't want to be the reason you lose someone you love. You're the reason I know what love is, he replied immediately. She fell silent. They walked the rest of the way home without another word. But that night, sleep didn't come easily. Brian stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. Nina's voice, the laughter, his mother's silence, then his own words. We're done. He closed his eyes tightly. It hurt, more than he expected. But beneath the pain, there was no regret. The next morning, his phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends. Bro, what happened last night? You really dumped her like that? You should apologize, man. You went too far. Then Nina's message came in. You embarrassed me. We need to talk. Brian stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. There's nothing to talk about. Her reply came instantly. So that's it? After everything. Brian's fingers hovered over the screen, then moved. Yes. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then finally, You'll regret this. Brian locked his phone. Not as much as I would regret staying, he muttered. Days turned into weeks, and the silence that followed was loud. At school, whispers followed him. That's him. The guy who chose his mother over Nina. Crazy decision. One afternoon, a friend approached him. You really ended it like that? The guy asked. Yes. For your mom. Brian's eyes narrowed slightly. Say that again. The guy raised his hands. Relax. I didn't mean anything. Brian stepped closer. No, you did. So be clear. The guy hesitated. I just think you could have handled it better. Brian nodded slowly. Better how? By letting someone disrespect the woman who raised me. The guy had no answer. Exactly, Brian said, walking away. But strength in public didn't erase struggle in private. There were nights Brian sat alone, staring at old messages, old memories. Her laugh, her voice, the way she used to look at him. He missed it, and sometimes doubt crept in. Did I overreact? He whispered one night. From the doorway, his mother's voice answered softly. No. He turned. You heard that. I hear more than you think, she said, stepping in. Brian looked down. It still hurts. I know, she replied, sitting beside him. Doing the right thing doesn't always feel good immediately. He sighed. Everyone thinks I made a mistake. She smiled gently. Everyone doesn't live your life. Brian looked at her. Do you think I'll regret it? She shook her head. Not if you remember why you did it. He nodded slowly. And that was the moment he made another decision. If he was going to lose something that mattered, while others partied, he studied. While others rested, he worked. Late nights turned into early mornings. Failure came, but he didn't stop. Why do you push yourself like this? A classmate asked once. Brian didn't even look up from his work. Because I don't have a backup plan. Years passed. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. And everything began to shift. Congratulations, Brian, his professor said one day, shaking his hand. Top of your class. Brian allowed himself a small smile. Thank you. Opportunities followed. Job offers, connections, growth. And through it all, his mother was there. One evening, he handed her a set of keys. She looked at him, confused. What's this? Go outside, he said. She stepped out and froze. A small, beautiful house stood before her. Brian. Her voice trembled. Whose house is this? He smiled. Yours. She turned to him, tears already falling. No, this is too much. It's not enough, he said softly. Not for everything you've done. She shook her head, overwhelmed. You promised, but I didn't think. I told you, he said, his voice steady. You wouldn't have to struggle forever. She pulled him into a tight embrace. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Brian closed his eyes. Those words meant more than anything. Years later, Brian wasn't just successful, he was respected, confident, unshaken. And then, one day, Brian, he turned. And there she was, Nina. She looked different, still beautiful, but quieter somehow. Hi, she said, unsure. Hi, he replied calmly. There was a pause. I heard about you, she said. You've done well. Brian nodded. I've been working. She smiled faintly. I can see that. Another silence. Then she took a breath. I've thought about that night. A lot. Brian said nothing. I was wrong, she admitted. I was arrogant. I disrespected someone who didn't deserve it. He watched her carefully. I didn't understand back then, she continued. But I do now. Brian finally spoke. What changed? She looked down briefly. Life. It has a way of teaching you things the hard way. He nodded once. It does. I lost someone good, she said quietly. Brian didn't respond. Do you ever think about us? She asked. He held her gaze, calm and clear. No. The answer hit harder than she expected. She swallowed. I deserved that. Brian's tone remained steady. This isn't about punishment. It's about choices. She nodded slowly. And you chose right. He didn't argue. I'm sorry, she said, her voice soft. I know, he replied. She looked at him one last time. Take care, Brian. You too. And just like that, she walked away. This time he didn't feel pain, only peace. That evening, Brian sat with his mother outside their home, watching the sunset. You look happy, she said. I am. She smiled. You've come a long way. He nodded. We have. She looked at him, proud. You didn't let the world change you. Brian shook his head slightly. No, I just became more of who I already was. She squeezed his hand gently. And in that quiet moment, everything felt complete. If the story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have made the same choice as Brian?